Thank you so much for joining me this morning. I know you touched on it in the introduction, but my consultation experience, it's been there's been a lot of similarities to my work that I'd done in the office. But it's been a kind of a bit of a breath of fresh air in a sense too, in that I'm able to kind of work with programs on a more hands-on level and getting more involved with their documentation and seeing things and offering more of my expertise. So that's been great for me. A disclaimer though, I'm not an employee anymore, but I still say we, and when I say we, I'm meaning CACREP. So if you could afford me the grace that when I say we, I'm referring to CACREP. I'm trying to get myself out of that habit, but please forgive me there. And another caveat, my presentation style is kind of casual. I try to inject a little bit of humor here and there because for the past 10 years, I would say CACREP accreditation has become a lot more high stakes, and it can cause a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress for some programs, and certainly in different states compared to others too. So I try to kind of like casual, be a little lax, just kind of like take that edge off for you all, because it can already be kind of intense enough. Like some of you already shared, like all the responsibility that come along with managing accreditation for your program. And lastly, in thinking of like intentionality, I hope we all walk away with a greater sense of how CACREP supports counselor educators and the role CACREP provides counselor educators to really drive the profession forward. Okay. So just to revisit our objectives. And you might notice I added a bonus objective. Now my presentations have bonus objectives, so I'm sure everyone is like, I am so glad I came to presentation. It's a bonus objective. You don't see that. So we're going to discuss CACREP accreditation and the standards and the opportunities they provide for you all to engage in leadership opportunities. We'll go through some examples of leadership theories and their applicability towards consultative leadership style, and then we'll also discuss how counselor educators can leverage the standards and policies to lead their programs. And the bonus objective, I hope at the end we all can engage in some discussion, as that supports the mission of the Counseling Research and Leadership Lab by talking about leadership and contributing to the profession that way. So look forward to that. Okay, so who and what is the Council for Accreditation of Counseling and Related Educational Programs? Well, who? It's it's you all, it's me, and it's all of us. It's counselor educators, it's professional counselors, it's site supervisors, it's students. And I think sometimes faculty, programs, whatever, can get kind of bogged down and lose that line of sight, if you will. Sometimes people think that CACREP is like this entity that just sits off in the clouds and just rains down standards that makes everyone's lives miserable. And that's certainly not it. I think it's important for us to be mindful that we all contribute into the development of standards. And a real quick plug, the Standards Revision Committee is actively working on the 2023 standards. There are opportunities to contribute to the conversation about the next set of standards that are coming out. If you go to the CACREP website, there's some links to meetings that you all can attend and offer your opinion and insights to anything kind of feedback you have about standards. So I would encourage you all to do that. CACREP is now in 405 institutions across the country and Puerto Rico. And you know, it's just really grown immensely over the last couple of years. And ultimately, you know, what is CACREP? It's quality assurance at the end of the day. It's meant to ensure that our students are walking out with adequate training to be out in the field. And I think it's also fair to say what it's not. You know, CACREP is not the accreditation police. CACREP is not out to catch programs and say, aha, we got you, you're not making a standard, shame on you kind of thing. But CACREP does have a role to, you know, not only in a full review process of seeking accreditation, but there's like certain reports, and we'll mention them in a bit, to kind of just ensure that things are still kind of going the way they should. So nothing about CACREP is meant to be punitive. So I think that's important to note. Okay. An overview of CACREP accreditation. You know, I'm gonna, you know, go through this fairly quickly. But two main pieces are really seeking and maintaining accreditation and how that's most applicable to you all. And this will then help lay a foundation for consultative leadership. And process and condition, to think about CACREP accreditation is that it's an ongoing process that yields a condition, a process that, again, maintains a condition of accreditation. And again, we'll kind of maybe touch on that just a bit more as we go. Okay. So preparing to seek accreditation, like some of you have stated, are in the early stages, or you're currently accredited and looking to seek reaccreditation. You know, so things to consider, is it just you really, who is pretty much here? This has been you've been tasked with this, and you got to make it work. Or do you have a team and it's more collaborative, and like you have people in place and you're all working on it together? You know, a person will never be completely alone completing a self-study, just because there's so much information to put into a self-study that you need input from other people who have the knowledge. So you never be completely alone. But you know, what kind of support do you have too will dictate how that goes. Do you have strong administrative support? Can you negotiate release time? Can you negotiate getting a GA or even a stipend for the amount of time you'll spend? And conducting a SWOT analysis is helpful to begin. I don't really like the T in SWOT because it's like threat. I don't think that's helpful, but strengths of your program and opportunities for your program to make improvements to meet standards, I think, is helpful. A real quick story about this. I had this faculty. He was junior faculty, and I was talking with him about some feedback that was in the review for the self-study, and he was like, wow, thanks a lot for this, I appreciate it. He goes, you know, my program, my administration just said, here, go after this, you know, give it a shot. If you do, great. If not, oh well. You know, and lo and behold, that institution is rolling out a counselor and supervision doc program this fall. So anything can happen, right? So yeah, kind of like telling that story. All right, so now, you know, getting into like writing a self-study, I would just encourage you all to familiarize yourself with resources. How to write a self-study workshop. Sans the pandemic, they were held throughout the year. Hopefully they will be held throughout the year in the near future. Great way to get some hands-on training, if you will, get some input from board members and staff. Go to the CACREP website and familiarize yourself with the resources they have. They have plenty of them, be it webinars, documents, just read related to standards and policies, and visiting the website is always free. So I encourage you to do that. Okay, now jumping like the review process. And, you know, I'll say this, how well your self-study is constructed generally indicates how smoothly the remainder of the review process will go for your program. So I always stress to programs that put the effort in now, don't leave anything hanging, and if there's something that's still in development, talk about it, you know, and be, not that programs I think are attempting to be non-transparent, but being transparent. So an initial review, you submit your self-study, it's reviewed, you get some feedback on it, you may have to complete an addendum, and that would just be answering to some more of the feedback, some of the feedback that was in the initial review, or it might be voluntary. And if it's required, that just might be the last bit of documentation that would need to be looked at before the program gets approved for a site visit. A voluntary addendum is really just if you want to give the site team some extra information, you can do that. It's not required. The team comes out, or if you're in an online program, your team probably is on campus, but they're doing a lot of things in video conferencing platforms as well. The team generates a report. The program has an opportunity to respond to that report, and all of that documentation goes before the board to for the board to make an accreditation decision. And the board meets twice a year in January and July. So yeah, the review process in a nutshell. Now maintaining accreditation. So we got the seeking accreditation. Now let's talk about maintaining accreditation. Program evaluation is a part of maintaining accreditation. You know, spoiler alert, program evaluation offers a significant area for consultative leadership, but we'll get into that in a bit. You know, so it's ongoing. You know, and like if there's an interim report, it may be applicable, it might not be. But programs strive to get an 8-year accreditation decision, which is a full, term of accreditation. Interim report might be needed after like a 2-year time, where submit the interim report, clarify a few more things, and then the program can continue on with the remainder of its accreditation cycle. Substantive change reports, again, these are applicable in the case of, say, so your program is completely on campus, again, sans the pandemic, completely on campus, and your program is going to now roll out half of the coursework in an online format. That would be a pretty notable change that you would need to inform CACREP of, so the board can review that information, ask any questions, get clarification, just to, again, ensure the program is doing what it needs to be doing to maintain standards. And you know, so this is where the process of maintaining the condition of accreditation is. And so the mid-cycle report, you know, so the program is accredited under the condition that it continues its processes. And this is where the mid-cycle report comes in, because all programs submit this in the midway point. So after 4 years of being accredited, to say, tell us about any changes that have happened in the last 4 years, and are you still meeting not every single standard, but it's chunks of standards. It's not a full-blown self-study that you need to submit again, but like a midway check-in, and you know, just again, part of quality assurance. That's what CACREP is, to ensure that that's still being you know, maintained. Okay. So now that we've overviewed CACREP accreditation, you know, let's transition to first looking at consultation before jumping into consultative leadership. Okay, so consultation in CACREP standards. So this is important to point out, because we find consultation in the CACREP standards, and we know that consultation is a part of the work we do as counselors and as counsel educators too. And that's contextualized in the standards in terms of if it's curricular content, like 2F1 and 2.5F, consultation in professional practice, so consultation between a faculty and a site supervisor, the program, the specialty area standards, they nuance consultation as to what that looks like based on their settings and their specialties. And finally, the doc standards, leadership and advocacy, talk about consultation. So it's part of the profession. CACREP talks about it, but I think we should still take a look at what is it exactly. So I have a definition, and I think it's fairly straightforward. A expert is sought out to share their knowledge, and I think we're pretty clear on that. But now that we've kind of talked about, so we have consultation, it's part of our profession, we know what it is. So let's look into leadership now. So what I find interesting about leadership is that it's theorized in these two examples. And as we discuss leadership, let's try to think of it within the context of counselor education. So the leader membership exchange, LMX, it sounds like a hot new club downtown. Let's go to LMX. So it conceptualizes leadership as focusing on two people, right? It's the leader and the person that they lead. And let's, invest in that relationship. And we're going to, doing that, generate outcomes. With path goal, there's flexibility with path goal in that, there may be a need for a leader to adopt different styles, like supportive leadership or an achievement-oriented leadership style. So a supportive leadership style is the leader comes to those they lead and they say, how can I best support you? What do you need to, meet our goals? And then the people they lead say, well, I need more time off. And they say, sure, you got it. No, I'm kidding. An achievement-oriented, this is maybe a silly example, but you sort of throw the carrot out in front and then the rabbit or horses, maybe, they go after the carrot. But like the leader basically lays out goals, and as people work towards those goals, it's like highlighting, doing great, working towards that goal. Come on, everybody, we're all going to make it. These aren't bad things, but again, this is just the flexibility within the path goal theory. So these theories, they seem to point us toward consultative leadership. So let's look at that. Okay, so here we have, I'll give everyone a moment to read this. So I adapted this definition from the source indicated. And I found consultative leadership mentioned in the business blog and websites about leadership. So clearly this is new to counseling and counselor ed. So let's break this definition down. So the first two sentences appear to strike at our previous definition of consultation, expert, sharing advice, sharing their knowledge. And the remaining sentence touches on leadership theories of LMX and path goal. But where things differ for consultative leadership is that the power dynamic is a balancing act or reciprocal between the leader and those they lead. Or think of a teeter-totter where the expertise may be higher for one person and the other person is seeking the expertise. And so consultative leadership balances the teeter-totter, if you will. Okay. But now you might be thinking, I think this sounds familiar, consultative leadership. And I provided some close styles or a word used that does sort of seem like the same thing, but upon further review, they're not. So democratic leadership is just another term that came up in my research. It just pretty much just said that, like, oh, here's another definition for this, and it didn't give anything more. Participatory leadership, it leaves out the back and forth of expertise and input. Participatory is simply the leader taking from those they lead with nothing more than leaving the person with a feeling of participation in the decision. Again, not a bad thing, but it's just, leader comes, hey, everybody, here's a chance to participate. Okay, great. Here's this idea. Thanks, everyone. See you later. There doesn't seem to have that give and take like we have in consultative leadership. Okay. Now, this is for my visual learners out there. So let's visually conceptualize this within the context of counselor ed. So faculty have decision-making power somehow, some way, on some level, and they have knowledge. Just like administration has knowledge and has decision-making power. Now, yes, one could say that an administrative role has more power, but it does not negate the power that faculty have, because again, faculty are the ones in the program, making it work, doing the teaching, supervising, research, advising, mentoring. You would all know what you do. It's there. It's both for everyone. Faculty can bring their knowledge and decision-making to administration, and administration can then do the same thing back to faculty. Now, what does this have to do with CACREP accreditation? So, like I've said, consultative leadership is present within academia in general, but CACREP accreditation plays a role in driving when and in what context consultative leadership can be engaged. So again, there's this back and forth, and how does that look? Well, with CACREP accreditation, CACREP standards or policies say this requirement about a program. Faculty have the knowledge because they're the counselor educators. They know how best to implement whatever they need to implement to meet a standard. They take it to administration, say, here's some knowledge that we have. We got to make a decision about this. Administration can just be on the receiving end of that and it be done. And that could be like, thank you for that information, but no. Or administration can say, oh, I see what you're saying. Let me go ahead and leverage this back to you, and you go ahead and do what you need to do to meet this standard. So CACREP is that back and forth too of these are some requirements, this is how we have to meet them. Can we get people on board? What more do we need to do to bring them on board? And what have you. Okay. Now, we'll look at some examples of how consultative leadership is applied through CACREP standards, policies, and the accreditation process. So first, we'll look at the standard. The standard is, I would say, probably fairly familiar with folks. And that is essentially that, so core faculty being full-time counselor educators are essentially delivering the majority of the course credit hours, or a more simpler way to think of this is just courses, than non-core faculty being generally part-time adjuncts. In some rare instances, they can be full-time faculty, tenure track, whatever. And essentially, let's kind of paint a scenario of, so you are all the faculty, and your program has, the person is retired, and that line is not being replaced. Okay, so you now see that you're in a bit of a pickle because now you have to maybe bring a couple adjuncts on. And now what's happening is the number of credit hours delivered by your non-core adjunct folks is more than you and your fellow colleagues who are considered core faculty. So what do you have? You have the knowledge of the standard. The standard says core faculty need to be teaching the majority of the credit hours over a calendar year. And administration said, well, sorry, you're not getting that line. Okay. You take the standards as your leverage and you say, listen, we're currently accredited, or we're seeking accreditation. And you pull up some numbers and you say, look, based on these numbers, this is what we need. We need that line back, or we need to hire so that we can stay in compliance with CACREP accreditation, and namely this standard. And what also is helpful is depending on when you're doing this. So again, if you're seeking accreditation, like you're actively developing a self-study, you have that even more leverage to say, I gotta put this in a self-study that this is out of whack. We're not meeting this. I mean, we're gonna have to at some point, sooner rather than later. And yes, hiring does take a bit of a process, but this is where you can take the standards, leverage them, and take that role of a leader to say, this is what we need to do. This is what it has to, this is where we have to be. We've got to get to this point somehow, some way. And hopefully administration is on board and supportive. You laid out your case and they then give that decision-making power and they say, okay, we'll give you that line so we can stay in compliance with the standard. Okay. Let's move on to, and again, I know these are abstract, but this is, like, I just developed all of this recently. So I'm happy when I wrap up, I'm happy to engage in dialogue and conversation about this. Okay, moving on to policy now. So if you're not familiar with this policy, I'll give an example of what scenario where it's applicable, this policy. So again, you all as faculty, let's say one of your colleagues wants to develop a 48 credit hour clinical counseling program. It has, generally most of the other curriculum of your other programs, mixes in some school counseling specific coursework, maybe a little bit of rehab counseling coursework and some diagnosis and psychopathology coursework. And it has a 300-hour internship. So yeah, some same coursework, but not the same as the 60 credit hour programs that you have in clinical mental health, school counseling, or clinical rehab, or what have you. So as a consultative leader, you see the issue this would bring, because what the policy says is that there cannot be an alternative. So you have 60-hour programs. You cannot have this alternative 48 credit hour program in the same area as these programs are accredited. This one's wanting to just sit here and hang out. So the policy is, you can't have that. And its purpose is, and again, this could be a consultation with calling the office, talking to some staff. Purpose is really that we don't want to create counselors who are not adequately trained as accredited 60-hour counselors, yet they're out in the field practicing, especially in your institution. So it essentially would make the profession not like look bad, but it just would kind of create more confusion about our role to the general public, how we assist them, and what our training looks like, and why we're qualified to do what we do. So that's why this policy is in place. So you bring your expertise to your colleague about the purpose of this policy to inform them of the issue with your program. And so the CACREP policy serves as your leverage and thereby supports your ability to lead effectively, right? Sometimes you could say, hey, it's not me. Look at the policy. I didn't make it. Granted, I know I said that we're all involved in CACREP, but in this example, this is how you can leverage policy to ensure your program maintains its accreditation or seeks its accreditation, with that issue. Okay, just a couple more examples. Okay, so self-study preparation. So for some of you folks who have done this or maybe in the middle of this, I hope you get a bit of a chuckle out of this. So in preparing a self-study, it's like all this information, right? Like, oh my gosh, overwhelming. And faculty are like, man, okay, it's not just me, right? I got some help and what you hope it to be. And sometimes it can feel like you're alone and you're just like overwhelmed. And you put it all on a little, you condense all this information and it's in like these series of files that it might not be on a USB drive, maybe it's in a cloud or something like that, but it's just, all this stuff and it's just hanging out here in this little thing. And then when you're ready to submit it, you really just upload it. So yeah. But anyway, so with self-study preparation, all right, so like some of you all have said or will be soon, so you're in charge of writing the self-study. And programs, generally most of them would have a clinical coordinator, someone assigned to being a clinical coordinator. So Section 3, professional practice standards, you take that to your clinical coordinator. CACREP outlines what those experiences should look like for your students. And you, as the person writing in charge of the self-study, identify who has the knowledge base, and you ask them to write or collaborate with you to write Section 3. So here's an example that consultative leadership, involving those in the process towards meeting the goal, which is a finished self-study. So again, there's that part of the definition of consultative leadership that's empowering, right? To meet the goal of a very nicely done, very well put together self-study. Okay, our last example. No worries if you can't see the diagram on your left. It's just meant to be blurry and look complicated and what is going on. So for program evaluation, again, this is what your program is doing all the time. This is happening all the time. This is the process that is continuous. And the CACREP standards give the framework of what it's to include. So like key performance indicators in 2016 standards, that's something you hold on to, like, okay, this is what it's got to be. And for what purpose? Well, so again, using our key performance indicator example, and again, if you don't, that sounds unfamiliar to you, just know that it's like a piece of data that ultimately is meant to ensure that your program is meeting its objectives. It's a student learning outcome for the purpose of meeting a program objective in its simplest form. So someone has to lead program evaluation activities throughout the year. And it's key to maintain, especially for those programs who are new, some of you folks who are newly developing a self-study, it's key to maintain what you have developed for your self-study, because it's going to be different from, say, 2009 some, or if you're just starting from scratch. It's key to develop it and ensure that all parties, all faculty are involved and contribute to the process. And that makes it easier to maintain it. So, let's say you're the assessment coordinator, and again, a consultative leader seeks thoughts, ideas, and opinions on how best to carry out program evaluation activities. And this is whether the program, again, is being developed the first time or revised. So as the coordinator, you might know what's best in terms of collecting and storing and reviewing data, while at the same time recognizing that others need to be aware of this knowledge as well. So I suggest, say, maybe writing a manual, because if it's a lot is falling on you, there's going to come a time where someone else will need to do it. So again, another real quick story. This program had gone through the accreditation process. They were, I believe, 6 weeks out of their site visit, and the program liaison suddenly passed away. And everything, the self-study, the addendum, everything was on his laptop. And I remember talking to the person who was taking over, and she said, you know, I'm not going to call up his wife and ask for his laptop. I said, well, yeah, of course not. She's like, I just don't know what to do. And I'm like, I get it. You've got some time. Just, you know, do what you can. Kind of keep me posted. You know, and it was just very difficult because it was very sudden. And then the team comes out. It's like, there were this many of us, now there is one less. And what does this mean for like core faculty resources? And so, I mean, the program made it and they got accredited, and, you know, everything was okay essentially, but things happen. And sure, it might sound like a pain. You're like, wait, I got to write a self-study. I got to write program evaluation. I want me to write a manual. Sounds like a lot. Yeah, I know. But again, I mean, I would just suggest writing a manual. But again, this is part of what that back and forth is, that sharing of knowledge, you know, and that balancing. And so, you know, and then that too, consultative leadership isn't always a person-to-person interaction. It can also be having a vision as a leader to know when others might need your expertise without directly receiving it from you. So one more thing to consider. So I ran some examples of consultative leadership and counselor education, but wait, there's more. Yes, folks, there is more. I'm not going to delve into these too much, but I hope I have conceptualized consultative leadership for you all, and you can all kind of see how it would be applicable in, you know, the community agency settings, hospitals for sure, K through 12 schools, clinics on a college or college campus, university campus. I don't conceptualize it to be just within, you know, a counselor ad. It can be more out in the field as well. And maybe that is something we can share with our students as well to take out there. Just to, you know, revisit, you know, so did we meet our objectives? Excuse me, I hope so. You know, I believe we touched on, you know, the CACREP Accreditation and how it's more than just standards, and there's leadership opportunities for you all to use those standards to your benefit, and the program's benefit. Went through some examples of leadership theories and how they kind of form together to bring us to consultative leadership. Again, discussed leveraging the standards and policies, and hopefully we hit our bonus, and we can really get into maybe some discussion about leadership, consultative leadership in the profession. And there's some references. And I think I'm pretty good on time, right, Yoon?
Well, you are perfect.
Oh,
I think we are 3 minutes before the mark, so this is good. Okay,
great. I'll stop sharing for a minute, but I can go back to the presentation if anybody needs me to. With the definition of consultative leadership, yeah, I can do that. I can do that right now. I will do that now. I am an on-demand presenter. So again, here's a definition that Donna asked for. So want to open up the floor to questions, comments, concerns. Even if there's anything else in the chat, if you wouldn't mind just sharing when you get a moment.
Sure. I think some people, I want to thank you all for sharing your experiences. and asking questions in the chat box. I think one question, one comment, but I want to bring it up because I think I speak for all of us. That sounds like my story, trial by fire. For me, yes, I think it speaks for so many people. Thank you for sharing that. One question was brought in is, do we need to have data collected from the program evaluation before the submission of the actual CACREP report?
It's really going to depend. It's going to depend. It's hard to look at that in isolation of the rest of the program. I mean, the board does, in my experience, the board does recognize that program evaluation it's a lot. You know, there's a lot involved with it. You know, it contextually, you know, does the program have graduates? Does it not have graduates? That's gonna be a factor. You know, again, I really can't give a definitive answer one way or the other, but I say this to any program, that if there's any kind of area of development that you lay out a timeline and to say, this is when we're going to have this, we're going to have this then next, and this next. You know, if you kind of just leave it out there that, oh, well, we don't have this yet. You leave the reviewers and the board to be kind of like, okay, so, you know, it then kind of gives the impression of like, yep, that one, I guess, just will have to wait. And it's like, the board doesn't accredit on future intentions. I mean, it generally credits on what you have going on, you know, now.
Another question is CACREP still doing site visits during COVID?
From what I know, again, I would check the website. I believe they've suspended site visits till the end of the year, and then any subsequent visits, they're going to be virtually until the situation with the pandemic is really under better control and there's less unpredictability, if you will. But yeah, but I would check the website. They're pretty on top of that. Yeah, I would check the website.
Yeah, I think the last question is one of our attendees is interested to hear you to talk more on the elements contained in the program evaluation. It sounds really complicated. One thing I also want to say is this is a perfect number for a webinar. They're a small enough number that we can all unmute ourselves and direct ask questions or have a conversation. So I want to encourage you all to do that.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm sorry, it was expanding on program evaluation. Sorry.
Yeah. Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, I read that, and then I also want to encourage the person who asked the question to
yes,
ask.
Yeah, I would like to hear more about it, because I just took up, like, it's almost like the person that was doing this CACREP retired, and soon after they retired, I was the point person right there because I was helping him out. I was also working together with him, and so I became the next of kin, and and so I'm just trying to figure out how he did it, and he's gone for good. In other words, you know, he retired, he didn't come back to do adjunct, like gone. So I just want to know how the program evaluation goes, because it's one of our difficulties. We got 2 years. We just got a CACREP reaccredited. You know, we were supposed to have 8 years. That's what we were thinking. And oh my God, we didn't get it. We got 2 years. So I'm the new guy stuck with all of this, trying to figure out how do we even get off the 2 years hook. And
yeah.
So that's what I'm trying to grab, like, what are the elements of a program evaluation?
Right. So first off, I would suggest you go to the CACREP website, and it's under resources, forgive me, they changed the website from when I left, and so I'm not as familiar with it as I used to be. There is a recording on program evaluation of the 2016 standards done by Dr. Kelly Coker. She was a former CACREP board chair. She goes through, she basically gives an overview of program evaluation, provides examples. It's about an hour, I think. That kind of gives a start to finish. Here are the program evaluation standards for 2016. There is also a document on the website that will give you some of that. It'll kind of give you like a conceptualization of program evaluation and give some examples. You know, if you've submitted a self-study, you know, and there's no other documentation of what you do for program evaluation, I would go back to your self-study and see what you have and compare that to, or how it's been developed, say if there's been addendums or any responses to site team reports. But basically the last documented piece of information you have for program evaluation, and then reconcile that with the feedback that the board gave you in your decision letter, because the board will say, these pieces are still, you know, we're not clear on this. Then that'll kind of give you a starting point to say, this is what we have, this is what's missing, and now let's, you know, I can't stress enough for program evaluation, like, you know, the standards require you have a plan. It's a documented plan. It has to, you have to have one. So I would think there's got to be something that you have, and maybe it needs to be tore down and start from scratch. Maybe it can be you can build off it. And depending on how your institution runs, what can be kind of tricky is, you know, institutions require all kinds of reporting from their programs, and it makes us sad, but and we got better things to do at the time. No, they have their purpose, but it just can see it's a lot. And sometimes you can take what your institution might do for you and say, this is what they do for us, like say an alumni survey. But how do you get that data, you know, and what you do with it? There's that, you got to account for that. That's just an example. So it kind of depends on what you got. Yeah, if you're feeling overwhelmed, you're not alone. You know, but starting somewhere, look at what you have. You know, you've reported to date, and you really got to make it a well-oiled machine, because a lot of times with program evaluation, like programs like do things, they've got pieces. It's just not functioning well enough to say, this is when we disseminate, you know, this information. This is when we collect this information. This is when we review this information. This is when we figure out what to do with it.
Because the connection with that is, I'm looking at our report, the letter from the board. It's under section 4, evaluation in the program. We didn't meet standard D, G, and H. And all of that has to do with program evaluation. And it's D, G, and H, and it sounds like it has to do with, you know, cooperating agencies, institutional administrators, personnel. It has to do with dispositions, and remediation, retention, dismissal. I just summarized. And it sounds very complicated, and we don't have any diagrammatic flow of how this is all done. I saw you had a really nice diagram somewhere. Are you going to share the PowerPoints? Maybe I can pick up a few bits from there.
I'd be more than happy to. You and I can send those to you, and you can share them with folks. Yeah, no problem. My diagram was really just conceptualizing. Right. From the example. The example for evaluation. You know, those aren't really, those were just kind of like putting the information up. I wouldn't say that that's, you know, a definitive way to really conceptualize program evaluation. Again, I would consult the resources on the website, because they're free. And again, I'm a consultant, so I'm happy to, if your program has interest, I'm happy to work with the program and you know, get into more of those weeds with you and figure out how to help you out best.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
David, may I say something?
Yes, yes, sir.
So I served as an initial reviewer for a year, and one of the things that struck me was the standards, of course, set the standard. They don't then tell a program how to meet the standard.
Correct.
And so that's throughout the entire set of standards. Hey, we expect you to do this, but we allow the program then, and I'm not saying I'm not tied to CACREP, the standards then allow you to meet it within your programmatic identity and mission.
Correct.
So a state school will meet that differently than a private school. And I'm a chaplain in the Army. So a Christian school will meet that differently than a state school. Whatever the background of that organization is, it will feed into the mission and allow you then to define that mission, how you meet the standards, and then demonstrate that with evidence. And that's what I saw. A lot of programs would say, hey, we're meeting it, but not provide any evidence to how they're doing it.
Sure.
But provide evidence to say, yes, we're meeting the standard in this way within our identity and mission. And so I think that often gets lost in the conversation. Here's the standard, meet it. Show me how you're doing that within your vision and mission. Okay, yeah. I'll yield the floor.
Yeah, no, that's great, Ron. That's a great conceptualization, and that's a lot of what we would cover in a How to Write a Self-Study workshop. Is yes, it's one thing to say you do it, but just back up what you said and just show us what that is and what that looks like. And one of the criticisms of CACREP is that, oh well, it creates cookie cutter programs, and that is, nothing could be more further from the truth. And here's a funny thing: CACREP standards are written at a minimum, you know, and programs might think, like some programs, and I've heard this, programs will complain, why is the standard like this? I don't even know what it means. This is such a pain to me, and so on and so forth. And I can get that. It's like I said, there's an overwhelming process. But that's how they're written. Like they're imperfect standards, and we're imperfect people living in an imperfect world. You know, but this is the profession's attempt at minimally laying out. This is what a counselor-ed program should look, feel, act, function like. You know, and there is plenty of latitude and flexibility for programs to do that. Again, it's not perfect, but it's there.
I just wanted to build on what Ron was sharing about, you know, that, meet the standards.
Regina, I'm so sorry. Could you? I can't hear you that well.
Oh, can you still hear me?
Kinda. Sorry, I'm like, wait, let me get closer to my computer.
I need to. I don't know why that's weird. Sorry.
That's okay.
But so the other piece kind of being, now tell us what you're doing with it. So standard, you're, show us how you're meeting it, what you're using to meet it. Let's get that data. And then what are you actually doing with the data? So just a couple of thoughts kind of in response to what John was sharing is, number one, I think that one of the problematic pieces, because I actually really love what CACREP did with the 2016 standards. I'm looking forward to the revision, but yes, I love that piece of, it's a lot less restrictive, but sometimes, that ambiguity can be challenging for folks, because it's like, well, what exactly do you want me to do? It's like, tell me what you want me to do and I'll do that. But I think that CACREP wanted the approach of, it's not cookie cutter, you're also different. So these are the standards, and then you guys figure out how to meet it. Well, sometimes corralling faculty into that process of, hey, incredible minds, how are we going to do this? Is like a really painful process. But so I think that there's this piece of how do we demystify that and come together as a community to kind of share some of those ideas, because it almost feels like there's this shroud of secrecy, and no one really wants to step up and talk about, well, this is what we're doing and how we're using it. So I mean, I don't know that that's something that CACREP would ever do, is facilitate some kind of opportunity opportunity for programs to be like, all right, if you're kind of in this process right now, you know, we'll, you know, set up a forum where folks can come together and you can all just kind of like talk through what you're doing and share resources, you know, knock yourselves out, because, you know, like programs individually aren't just going to know who else is going up for accreditation at any given time. So that's just kind of one thought that I had. And the other piece of it, I think that what the challenge for us, so Georgia State just went through this process. The challenge for us was just how to systematically collect the data in a way where it's like we're not all scrambling at different times doing different things. So just like coming up with a system and sticking to it and getting kind of all of the faculty on the same page of doing everything systematically. So we're still trying to figure that piece out. But in any case, I just want to say that, John, I appreciate, you know, kind of what you're sharing and some of the frustration and uncertainty behind that. I'll share my email in the chat, and if you want to reach out, I'm happy to chat with you about what our process looks like and how we went about some of that program evaluation piece, because I know that it can be, when you feel like you're starting from nothing, it can feel a little intimidating.
Yeah, absolutely, Regina. Thank you so much for sharing. You know, there's really like nothing stopping programs from, you know, offering a space to collaborate. You know, I remember I would tell programs sometimes to access the directory and, you know, either see who your neighbors were around your state, or see what programs maybe have a look and feel like you do. Like we have these characteristics. What other institutions are like that out there and have CACREP, and can we, you know, I guess I'm a big, my mother always taught me it never hurts to ask. So I just have this, you know, philosophy of, well, you just send an email, and if they get it and they respond and they're happy to help you, great. If not, okay. You know, doesn't hurt. So, you know, I think for programs to pool resources, and sometimes, sadly, programs, and you know, there's truth to this, and that, you know, they can look at each other and be seen as competitors. Yes, sure, but at the same time, you know, I mean, if you're trying to get your program accredited, and I mean, to me, it's like the more programs, you know, I mean, it's not, we're not doing a bad thing. We're not accrediting armed robbers, you know. We're trying to put out good into the world. So helping each other out, I think, would be, you know, charitable. Yeah. Any other questions, comments, concerns?
You were saying earlier about standard S. Is it 1S?
1S, yes. Mm-hmm.
1S. And I really like the way you explained it. Can you just say a little more? I mean, like a little expansion about it, because it looks like a very critical standard for applying consultative leadership.
It is. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Sure. Go ahead.
I remember when I started at CACREP, we had the 2009s. And I remember looking at this standard, and I learned very quickly how important it was. And I got my manual right here. And I remember going, I mean, I was just an observer of the standards revision of the 2016s. And I remember, because I would tell programs, they'd be like, what, I don't understand this. What's the big deal? I don't get it. And now the 2016s put it in there. It says, to ensure that students are taught, primarily by core counselor education program faculty. The number of credit hours, you know, are taught by core faculty. And it's really to ensure professional identity. You know, counselor ed is booming. I think there's like 90 90 plus counselor ed doc programs now in the country. Like when I was looking into doc programs in like 2014, there was maybe 60. Now there's like 90 plus. That's incredible. And so it's important that we have counselor educators primarily teaching our students to ensure those students get a professional counseling identity instilled in them, instilled in the curriculum. This is not to say that LMFTs, marriage and family therapy folks, they're not going to bring anything of value to the table. Not that psychologists aren't going to bring anything to the table. Social workers, psychiatrists, whatever, nurse, even. It's not to say that someone won't bring anything additive to the table, because our students are going to find themselves in integrative settings, be it school or out in the community or whatever. So we're not that we want to be, so selective and like have tunnel vision, but because our identity has been thwarted and continued to be sort of threatened throughout our history, we need to have something in place that says, these are the folks by their identity primarily teaching our students. So our students know who they are professionally when they come out of this program. So that's why adding that in the 2016s was helpful. Granted, we just unpacked it a little bit more because it goes back to professional counseling identity. And I know it's difficult. I think what's neat is I know about 4 or 5 counselor educators who are deans, and like they get it. They get counselor ed, right? Not everybody has that luxury. And so there are administrators who are like, what do you do again? What? They just don't understand. So, we have to sort of break down, look, I know this pushes up against the budget. It's not, what we would prefer financially or whatever the case is, but, accreditation is really important, again, because we have these reasons why we want to be accredited. And you stand to lose more money if you're unaccredited. So, giving, and hiring counselor educators is really, helping yourself in the long run. Maybe you're in a state where it's tied to licensure, maybe not. And there's only a few. You got to just lay out the reasons of like, look, real quick and simple, like big picture, this is why this matters. Down to this level, this is why it matters. I get it. It sounds nuanced and complicated, and we might seem like we just whine and cry that we want to see at the table, but it's because we haven't really had a seat at the table all the time. It's just kind of like laying out a picture, simplifying it for them, and use some counseling skills, throw in some empathy. Be like, look, I get it. I can't imagine being in your shoes, having to deal with all this, that, and the other thing, maybe. Yeah. Good question.
Great. Maybe I'll jump in a little bit. I think we're 10 minutes until the end of the webinar. I'll say 5 minutes for concluding. So that means we have 5 more minutes for questions and answer. And people wrote some really kind words and encouraging things for you, David. But I think to save time, I will save it for you so you can read afterwards.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Anyone else? Any burning questions or?
I got a question about, have you ever had yourself in a program where you went to do a review and then you realize there is some financial problems going on and faculty left, retired, and they're not being replaced, and you're kind of left with the short end of the stick, and you're saying to yourself, you don't even know how the survival of the program would be, like the future of it, because they're not replacing nobody. It's just financial hardship, just hypothetical.
All the time. I encounter that all the time. Reviewing programs, and even in consulting. So CACREP does not look at, it's not a regional accreditor where it really looks and digs around in the financial viability. I mean, there is a standard that talks about that there's a commitment of finances to run, support, the program in every facet that it needs that support. So yeah, there have been plenty of times where retirements happen, lines don't get replaced. I know I'm jaded, but everybody in higher ed cries poor. That's just been my experience. So one way or another, maybe not everybody, but I know a lot of programs that say budget cuts and this and like, yep, everybody. I'm really not trying to diminish anyone's experiences, but anyway, it happens. And I mean, well, and it comes out in the standards, like you kind of, programs in those situations, they can't hide it and they can omit the information. I don't recommend anybody do that, unethical for sure. But the standards, like it's just going to happen. Like there's those two, like standard S and the standard T, which is FTE. It's going to reveal itself one way or another. And, a program won't move forward if they're really not in a good place. It's happened more often than not. Programs were denied, have been denied accreditation because, other reasons, but faculty being an issue in terms of number or identity and both. Programs who try, go through the review process for the first time don't get a site visit because they can override and they can request a site visit anyway. But I've had to write letters to programs laying out a pretty long list of reasons why this program's not ready to seek accreditation. And again, it really, a lot of it comes down to the support you have. If you have administration who's like, what do you need? Tell me what you need, I'll give it to you, and you can go and do, right? If you don't have that, it's going to be difficult. And it's a lot of, and I've experienced a lot of like sort of fitting a square peg into a round hole, and they try to jam it through, force it through, it just doesn't work. And it ends up being a waste of time and money. And sometimes administrators don't want to hear that, but that's how it goes. So yes, Roberta.
Yes, I know we're at time, and this has been just wonderful, a quick 90 minutes. I just had one quick question. In addition to the CACREP website, are there any other resources you recommend? Like say for someone like me, just kind of starting from scratch, really. Like any other books, any other articles, that come to mind?
Well, it's going to depend. If you're trying to build an argument, maybe, well, not an argument. I know you said you're the department chair and dean are like, kind of look into things. I mean, there have been articles published. They're on the CACREP website that talk about the benefits of an accredited program. If you maybe do a search in like JCD, perhaps the Journal of Counseling Development, or just maybe do like a general kind of lit review of CACREP accreditation and its benefits. I can think of one from the late Barry Muscari and his wife Jane Weber. They did a article several years ago about CACREP being a means for licensure portability, but it all depends on how much of a case you're trying to build and how much context you need and things like that. But the website really has a lot of stuff on it. A lot of stuff is on the CACREP website. Or a consultant.
Okay, or a consultant. Okay, great. Thank you. I didn't know if you offered workbooks or other resources too. But,
yeah, I don't think, there's like none out there. And if you find any, I would be very leery of them. Like if it's not from the CACREP website, I would, and I tell this to programs too. I'm like, because I've heard of horror stories. I remember one in particular. this program submitted, they were not recommended to proceed with the site visit, and they withdrew their application. And I remember this woman telling me, she was, but we paid for the consultant. And I was like, I am so sorry. And I've heard that these consultants, they kind of false advertising, and it wastes people's time and money. And so I tell people that when they shop consultants, that they are very much thoroughly and vetting the people that they're working with. And I tell programs that too. I'm like, look, just because I worked in the program, I worked for them, doesn't mean like I'm a good fit or whatever the case is. So you got to find a good fit, and they have the requisite expertise.
Excellent.
You know, to pick that up.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Great question. Okay.
Yep. Well, time is up. So I'm sending some information here in the chat. So we have in the summer we have a webinar from the president of CACREP, Dr. Fernandez. So this is the last YouTube video that I posted. Feel free to check it out. Another YouTube link is our CRLL channel, and in which you'll find a whole bunch of webinars regarding research and leadership. So hopefully that'll be helpful. As we are coming to a conclusion of today's webinar, I want to thank you everybody for coming here. And thank you, David, for really being such a thoughtful and committed presenter. We really appreciate you.